All right, what is going on? Welcome to episode 4 of Asset Creators. It's Darian here, and once again, another episode I'm very excited about. I know I say that about every episode, maybe because it's new, but these are all topics that I think are really important to talk about as solopreneurs. So as you can see by the title of today's episode, we are going to be covering 3 important reasons to get off the content treadmill. So if you're wondering what the hell the content treadmill is, what that even means, we're going to go deep into that. I'm going to give you the reasons, and I'm also going to give you the solution to the content treadmill. And it's going to be really awesome. So like always, let's just dive right in. So as you can see here, the first thing I want to explain always is what is the content treadmill, so you can understand what we're talking about, but you can also see, do you relate? Does this make sense? Do you feel this way? Are you on this content treadmill right now? So essentially, all the content treadmill is when you're constantly coming up with new ideas. You're writing content from scratch, and you're spending 5+ hours a day writing social media content. 5+ hours a week writing social media content. That's a lot of time. And when you're on this treadmill, you're always creating new short form content. You're not creating long form assets that bring you value over time, like while you're not working, while you're sleeping, things like that. So this is a really important concept to understand. I was stuck on this for definitely a year and a half, almost 2 years. My clients, usually when they come to me, they are on this content treadmill right now. So that's why we're bringing awareness to it, and we're going to show you how to get off of it. But it's just not a good place to be, because when you're on this treadmill, you're constantly just winging things. Even if you have a strategy and you have a system for writing content, you're not doubling down on ideas. You're not going deeper into concepts that your target audience needs to care about. And you're constantly coming up with new angles and new things, right? And that's no way to live, because it's exhausting. It's hard to be consistent. And to really drive this home, I'm going to tell you a really quick story. So when I first got started in the online space, of course, I used to think that content was all about consistency and getting followers, right? Because I thought that followers meant money. And how many of you right now feel that way? Pretty easy to feel that way, right? But what you'll notice pretty quickly is that there's a lot of people who have a lot of followers who aren't making money. It's very common, right? Followers do not equal money. And so I was like, okay, cool. If I can just post content every day, I am going to be consistent and I'm going to get followers, which meant money. Okay. But over time, besides just not making money, it felt like a chore. Okay. So even though I love writing, staying consistent was really, really hard. So some days I just didn't feel like doing it. There was a point where I was writing all my content like a week in advance, and just to make sure I didn't miss anything. But even then, it still felt hard to just stay consistent, because I was just on this treadmill. And if you know what a treadmill is, right, you're running, but you're not actually moving anywhere. Okay. That's what it felt like. And I kind of mentioned this already, but even some of my new clients, when they first come to me, they're already spending 5+ hours a week writing just their content. And it's crazy. You'd be surprised. Like, some of them tell me it took them 2 hours to write a carousel or write a post. And that's insane. That is the content treadmill, right? Carousels, a little more understandable because they're longer, a little bit longer form, and there's some design aspects. But for just a regular LinkedIn post, if you're taking longer than an hour, like, that is not sustainable. That is the definition of being on the treadmill, because it shows me that you don't have a weekly theme or a weekly topic that you're doubling down on, okay? So what I did was I started writing a weekly newsletter. And even when I first started this newsletter, I did not have a large email list. So that wasn't the point. I started repurposing it into all of my short form content, right? So I would take this long form piece of content, usually over 1,000 words, okay? And in that, right, there'd be objections I would handle. There would be stories I would tell. But every single week, that newsletter was on one big idea or one big topic, right? So what I did was I was able to go deep. It took me about 2 hours to write it, but then I could just repurpose that into all of my content, my short form content on LinkedIn for the whole week. So I would take a story here and make a post about it. I would take an angle here. I would take an objection that I handled here. And next thing you know, I have easily 7+ ideas for my content, right? But even better is the long form, right? It's going to build more trust and relationships with my readers. We're going to talk about that more in depth in like a study that was published on this. But of course, on LinkedIn, it's not long form. But one thing you can do, just as a side note that I would do, is if I wrote a little story or a little excerpt from the newsletter, I would just link it, because I would take my newsletters and post it to my blog, right? And so in my LinkedIn post, I'd be like, hey, this is a part of my newsletter, and I would drive them to my long form. So now they could consume more of my content, okay? So that was a big thing that I was doing there, was taking that, okay? But once again, it let me go deeper into topics and themes, and it was just easy for me to chunk those down and then repurpose them into the content that was the short form content. It saved me hours of time, like hours of time, right? You just write this big thing once, take all the little pieces out of it, turn those into content. You can drive the traffic back to your newsletter or your blog. And so that was the story of how I kind of stumbled upon this. And I didn't even realize I was on the content treadmill until I started doing this process and being like, holy crap. I call this newsletter in part of my asset Trinity framework, which if you haven't seen episode 1 of this series, go check it out. I go deep into the asset Trinity framework, but these anchor assets are super important because it's an asset and it's going to build you value over time. I'm going to cover that a little bit more down here as well. But that was just a quick story to really drive home how I discovered this and how I was really struggling on this treadmill. And still to this day, almost every single one of my clients is when they first come to me. So now that you know what it is, really important for us to understand that. First, we can talk about 3 important reasons to get off the treadmill, okay? The first is it's very low leverage and a low return on your time. So what you'll notice, especially on LinkedIn, it's kind of changed over the last, 6 months, where now it's starting to show like older posts from people. But in general, your posts are going to be buried in the algorithm 1 to 3 days later, like after you post it. So, by the way, I'm not saying don't create posts, right? I'm not saying only write newsletters. Like social media is very important to drive traffic, get people into the asset Trinity. But you want to be more intentional about it. But just understand that it's very low leverage, constantly every day trying to come up with a new story or a new angle. Like one day, I don't know, let's just say you're in a fitness space, right? One day you're writing a post about why you need to be on the keto diet. Then the next day you're writing about something about abs. And then the next day. So like everything is just, it's constantly all over the place, even if it's still relevant to your niche, right? But when you have a weekly theme, it won't be that way. So you don't want your post to get buried in the algorithm, and you want people to be able to go consume longer form, okay? That's the first reason, is the leverage, okay? The next is going to be the return on time investment is very low. So we kind of already talked about this, but of course, yes, you can get followers, right? But they stay on social media. So getting followers online is cool, but it does not mean that you're going to be making money. It does not. It is more traffic, but it doesn't guarantee that, okay? So the investment of your time is actually very low when you're constantly just on this treadmill, coming up with new ideas every single day. Sometimes if you're, like I said, if you're spending more than an hour a day, that's not good. And then the final really important piece is the long form versus the short form in terms of trust and relationship building. So here's a study from Marketing LTB on long form content statistics. This is from 2025, so it's super relevant. But I highlighted some of the main takeaways from it. I know this is a live stream, but when the recording's up, you can pause it and read it more. I'm just going to read the highlighted ones. So long form blog posts, 1,500 words or more, generate 3x more traffic than short articles, okay? That's just traffic related. But when we're talking about trust and relationships, right? Average time on page increases by 45 to 70% for long form content. So they're literally spending more time with you, consuming you, trying to understand how your mind works, your worldview, your perspectives, okay? Here we got again, readers spend 3.5x more time on long form content than short term. I know this is editorial content and news briefs, but still, you got to think the longer form stuff is going to just build more trust, more relationships, right? And the final one to drive it home is 42% of B2B buyers read 3 to 7 long form pieces of content before contacting sales. Now, if you think about this, let's say a piece of long form is 1,500 words, or let's say 1,000 words for easy math, right? So 7 long form pieces of content would be 7,000 words, okay? So if it takes 7,000 words for them to think about, contacting you for sales or to buy, how many LinkedIn posts is that going to be? How many short form posts is that going to be? Obviously, so many. And then that's only based off the fact that you believe that they're seeing every post you post on LinkedIn, which also is not true. So the reason I wanted to show this was just really show you that coming up with new ideas every single day, short form content, is the content treadmill, and it's not the way you want to operate as an asset creator. Okay. You want to create assets. You want to create value, which is this next part, because when you're on the treadmill, you have little to no appreciation over time. And what I mean by appreciation is it brings or increases value for you over time. So 2 examples here that'll really drive this home, and I don't have to say much more. YouTube videos versus a reel. Okay. If you go to a YouTube video, or let's say you create a YouTube video, and that YouTube video, you post it on YouTube and it's great. You could literally get clients from that YouTube video for the next 5 years, right? You post it once. If it's super relevant, if you're ideally still have the same offer or doing something similar, it's going to appreciate for you. It's going to bring you value over time. Whereas a reel, okay, a very short form piece of content, cool, it can get you followers, it could go viral, but within a week, it's gone and the algorithm's looking for the next thing, right? Now you can think about the same thing as a blog versus a carousel. So my blog on my website, I have pieces of content in there from 2023 that when I was writing my newsletter back then. And the reason that's important is because they're still bringing me value. Because if somebody finds me or finds my website, they can go consume long form content from me all in one spot in a place that I own. That's my website, right? It's not on social media. It's not short form. So think about the blog versus just a carousel. Like, carousels are great. I'm not saying don't create them, but I'm just saying think about the trust, the relationships, the ability, the effect it's going to have on your business, especially for you to be able to take those blogs and repurpose them into shorter form. So you could take a blog and repurpose it into a carousel. But if you do that, link back to your blog so they can go read the full thing. And then third, less consistency in your messages or your messaging and your ideas. So there's not going to be as much congruency and consistency in your messaging and your ideas, right? If you're coming up with different topics every single day. So every single day you're coming in, you're coming up with new ideas, new pieces of content, new angles, new stories, all of this stuff. It's going to be really, really hard for you to be able to dial home a message to your audience that you really want them to hear. And same thing with your ideas, okay? So really important that when you're having different topics and different ideas every single day, you're not having consistency in your messaging, okay? The next one is it takes a while for enough data and feedback with short form. So when you think about it, if I create a newsletter, right? And kind of like I was mentioning, I like to create my newsletters in themes or one big topic for the week. And then all my LinkedIn content is around that topic, okay? So think about the amount of time it's going to take me to get data and feedback on that idea or that topic or that theme if only I'm posting it on Monday and then Tuesday's a different idea or a different topic and then Wednesday's a different one. By the time I go to next week and I go back to it, I've only mentioned it twice in 2 weeks. But when you write a newsletter and you repurpose that and chunk it down, still based around the one weekly theme, you get what I'm saying, right? You're driving home that idea, that messaging. And then you can watch the feedback from your audience, from the people online, and figure out pretty quickly, is this resonating? Is this not resonating, right? And I kind of just mentioned this again, but the weekly theme versus the daily themes. Like coming up with daily themes is fine if they're ideas that have already been validated, but realistically, you want to go deeper into your things. You want to go longer and repurpose those, but it's still based around a weekly theme, a message, an idea that you have, a theme that you have. So those are the 3 reasons to get off, right? It's low leverage and a low return on your time. There's little to no appreciation over time. and there's less consistency in your messaging and ideas. So hopefully by now, if you're on the content treadmill, you're looking at this and you're thinking, damn, Darian, okay, I'm with you, right? I want to get off this treadmill. I didn't even know I was on it. Maybe you knew you were on it, but you didn't know how to get off, which is what we're going to cover now, which is the solution. The solution is asset creation, and more specifically, an anchor asset. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but for more in-depth breakdown, check out episode 1 on why you need to become an asset creator, what asset creation really is, which is obviously the name of the series. But you can see here the asset trinity. This is my core framework that I teach my clients. I use myself, right, to make money online with our solo business, okay? And it's a different way of viewing content and viewing the game. But we're talking today specifically about the anchor asset, which is right here, okay? Which is essentially a long form piece of content that you create every single week on one core topic and theme that gets repurposed into all your micro short form content for the week. This is the easiest, fastest, best way for you to get off that content treadmill. I'm telling you, write this one thing, one long form asset, okay? You can drive your traffic there to build all that trust and everything that we were just talking about in this study right here, right? Drive the traffic to this. It's a place you own, right? And get them, start building more trust, get them to spend more time with you, which is amazing. Okay. So you get them there, but you can also take that, repurpose it, use it for all your content throughout the week. So now you're not coming up with new ideas every day. You're doubling down on the themes, the ideas, your messaging. That's it. That's the whole idea. That's the big idea from this video, is getting off the content treadmill, getting into creating anchor assets that appreciate over time, do everything we talked about in this episode. So you can see I'm really passionate about this because I was on the content treadmill for way too long, and I don't want you to be on the content treadmill any longer. So with that being said, that is it for this episode. So if you like that, make sure you keep tuning in, because I'm going to be going live every day, breaking all this stuff down, going deeper, and talking about asset creation and, you know, what it means to be an asset creator and how we can all become high leverage, more premium, right? Save time, all these things as solopreneurs. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. And with that, that is it for today's episode.